Well, good morning. Got a great episode in store for you today. Yeah, we're talking about grates. I often get asked, what grate should I do? What's the best grate? Ultimately, they all do the same job, and there's many ways you can do it. So it just depends what works for you. But what is the grate? We spend a lot of time building a loco, and sometimes people just rush the grate because it's not something you can see, which doesn't matter as long as it's doing the right job. So what is it? It's just got to hold the fire up inside the firebox. I've got a few examples of different grates laid out in front of me here, and I've also got a grate I need to put together for my father for his duchess, where the old one's worn out. So let's take a look at some different types. So probably the easiest to start with is one which is just cast iron. This is actually for a 3.5 Britannia. It's one of 3 sections. Yeah, by casting, put it in place. It does the job. This is for the 7.25 Ginty. As you can see, every bar has been drilled, spacers in between, and in this case the spacers are nuts. Whether it's threaded all the way or if it's been turned down so they just go past the end and then slide, I don't know. But you just clamp the bars together, drill through, probably use one as a template, drill through, put the nuts in as spacers, and then bolt it all together. Fairly easy. This one is another one that's been done by just drilling and round bar, but this is a spacer there and a spacer there, which has been drilled in 7 holes. Rods go through, and then there's a tack weld underneath to stop them sliding out. I believe it's also tacked to the support, which is then bolted to the side of the ash pan. That's for the pom-pom that I'm working on. It does the job. What's quite good about this is there's only a point contact, or a small point where the bars are at the closest. So anything that gets through that gap instantly goes to the ash pan. Whereas with flat bars, you can get it where the bits of stuff get stuck in between. My Speedy's great. This one needs replacing soon. But the way this was made is flat bar, 3/16, I believe, bar. And then extra pieces of the same bar were cut, clamped in between for spacers, just laid on the bench, all the spacers in, held it, put it in the vise probably, squashed it up so it didn't fall apart. Then just run a weld across there, run a weld across there, flip it over, same thing. Nice and easy, and the gaps are the same as the bars. As you can see, this one's getting quite worn out and very much in need of a new grate. Although, to be fair, that probably would do a few more seasons before it fully burnt out. I've seen worse. Using the same method for Enterprise, I can't find the original grate which had burnt through. I don't believe I got rid of it. It's around in the workshop somewhere. But this was my Mark II grate. I actually made that for Imlek. I believe they're 4mm. I think they were sheared from plate. I've got some offcuts in the drawer. I'll measure it up in a moment and let you know. yeah, done exactly the same way. Lots of pieces cut off, put together, and run a weld right across both ends, both sides. And I also put these lugs on the bottom, which fitted in the support for grate. The back end's changed. This is not the original ash pan either, but it does follow the same sort of design with the way it holds the feet. An experiment to modify from that, I read about the Rosebud grates, and here we have a Rosebud grate. Up to this point, this, and I thought that was, but I might be wrong, this was stainless. In this case, we just used mild steel. Now this has been running for probably 6 years in my enterprise. It's quite thin, because all I had to do was match the height of the old grate and just have it sit there. It does the same job, lets the air through. This doesn't let as much air through. It's about 15% air, whereas these were 50-50. 15% air, but in my opinion, they work pretty well. And if you haven't got any flat bar, a piece of flat plate can be easier to come across. Very little ash drops through them. After a day's running, you don't get much in the ash pan. And yeah, I was so pleased with the way that worked. My 5-inch Ginty has always had one of these. We'll look at that in a minute. It's already loaded in the back of the car. We'll have a look at that when we get down to the club. And the Duke of York has the same. Now the reason for it on the Duke of York, and I will show you the original grate, but I can't find it at the moment. I'll have another hunt and show it to you in a minute, I hope. But with the design of the ash pan on this engine, it's just a flat plate that comes out the sides. So I had very little air underneath. So with the old grate, I had big chunky bars, big chunky gaps, and anything that fell through would build up and clog the sides of the grate, where it couldn't fall in the ash pan. So I went for this design, which would do away with the need for being able to clear the ash, because I don't get much ash fall through this. You can see it's quite a thin plate. It does the job. I could probably do with making a new one, but it's done a couple of years so far. What I might do is just straighten it out a bit more and put a bit of flat bar down the side to keep it in line. But yes, that is all. I've just seen the original grate from this engine over here. So as you can see, the bars were far too far apart for my liking, and I mean I can fit my finger through them, and that just allowed so much ash to build up underneath the fire bars. So I did mention, oh, let's turn around. I did promise you I'd come back and measure the size of these bars. They're actually 3mm. So 3mm bars with 3mm spaces. Not a great deal falls through the bars, which, if you're trying to get ultimate efficiency and use all the coal you're burning, that's the best way to do it. Don't let it fall through. It will burn before it falls. Anything that falls through there into the ash pan is wasted. So this was actually from the metal fabricators over the road at work. They sheared for me, that's why there's a twist on the bars. They sheared off strips of 3mm stainless, which I then chopped into short lengths, clamped together and welded. I did straighten them as well before I did it. And yeah, that I'd done it for Imlek. I made it for Imlek with the intention that it would only have to last half an hour. However, using this grate, I've had it in steam for 4 or 5 hours before and not had any lack of performance. So it does work well. So while we've been looking at Enterprise's grate and the Duke, I will say what my formula is. So a lot of people, when they're doing the grid for the holes for the Rosebud grate, will just do it in a square grid. I don't know why I decided to go for each row being offset by half a hole. It disguises any slightly misdrilled holes for a start. And secondly, I think the reason I did it was I felt like there would be less of a dead patch. If you imagine if that was slightly over, there would be a big square without air, whereas here I've got a triangle. So that patch is smaller. I know we're talking about small sizes, so it really doesn't matter. But the formula, I've always gone for 1/8 holes. So each one of these is drilled with an 1/8 centre drill, drilled from the underside with a centre drill, which gives you a hefty countersink on the bottom. And then there's about 8mm spacing between rows in both directions. And like I say, the alternate rows I've staggered. So with any luck, that's quite easy to remember. 1/8, 8mm, 8 and 8. That's the way I think of it. And they've all worked for me. Like I say, Enterprise has got that grate. I was impressed enough to put it in Ginty. That worked and never had anything different. And then I did the same for the Duke, and that works. So 8 holes, 8 spacing. Let's carry on. So I did mention that I'm off to do a grate for my dad, for the Duchess. He's come up with a new way of building the grate. Modern technology and all. Laser cutting or water jet cutting. Slot together, weld it together, and everything's done for you, more or less. So we'll take a look at that one. So I'm welding up a new grate for my father's Duchess. This is a firebar grate. Here's one I've already done. There's 3 pieces to this, being a Duchess. It's a wide firebox, 3 bits go together, and I'll show you a little bit on the one I'm about to do. He's designed it in CAD, had the bits cut water jet by the look of it, and we're just welding them together. So let's take a look. So obviously the fire bars, these spacers, slot together, and then we just run a weld either side. As you can see, it's got a weld chamfer on there, which also looks like it was produced in the cutting process, and the same on these. So I can weld along here, flip it over, weld across the top. First weld done. Next one to go here, in the other end, then I'll flip it over. There's 4 welds completed on this side. Do not grab hold of it with my hands. Time to run a weld across the other 2 sides. And there we have a fully welded grate. So it was a pretty wet day at the club today. I'll show you a picture of when I was running Tornado. Yeah, it was not pleasant. So I did say I would show you Ginty's, but I forgot to take pictures before I went in the engine at the club. But here it is. So this is the grate that it has been running with for 6 years, I believe, and it's still in pretty good condition. It's about 4mm plate, and yeah, I'm happy with it. So with this grate and ash pan arrangement, I'm able to see how much ash has fallen out. And in a day's running, I could be in steam for 4 hours sometimes, and I doubt I've got a teaspoon's worth of ash in the ash pan. That's the benefit of the Rosebud grate. And I put those slots in the side so that I could rake it out if I needed to, and when I needed to. But as it turns out, I've never needed to. I've never felt the need to want to change to a fire bar grate. But a little side note on Ginty. We did steam test day today, and it was not successful. The pressure gauge was reading a bit high, which, okay, it's high, so it's safe side. So when you've actually got, for example, if the running pressure is 100 and it's reading high, when you've got 100 psi in the boiler, it's reading 120. But of course, you would set the red line to, or the safety valves will be set to the red line, and therefore, when you've got 80 pounds in the boiler, the gauge is reading 100, and the safety valves are lifting, and you're well within the safety tolerance of the design. It's better if they read correctly though. But that's just a side note, that if they are reading high, you are safer. So it's always read a bit high, that gauge, but this year it was reading a bit higher for some reason. So we tried adjusting it and we got it reading correctly. But it was reading about 20 pounds high. So when it was saying there was 90, there was probably only 70. When there was actually 90 in the boiler, it was reading about 110 pounds, which was a bit higher than I wanted. Just losing all that pressure at the top. So we adjusted the gauge, it was reading correctly, put it on the engine, steamed it up for the steam test, and I got to, the valves were lifting, safety valves were lifting, but there was only about 40 to 50 pound reading on the gauge. I was expecting to have to tighten down the safety valves because we'd adjusted the gauge, but I didn't trust it. I thought that was too much. We hadn't adjusted it that much. So I've decided to just buy a new pressure gauge and we'll finish the test next week. So that is that. So long story short, she's back here. Pressure gauge has already been ordered, and hopefully it'll be this week from Maidstone Engineering. So yeah, that's where we're at. I hope it's been interesting for you. As it happens, I was having a look at Tornado's grate when I dropped the fire, and she was made in that welded design where spacer pieces were cut and it's welded, I believe. That's what it looked like to me. So yeah, I hope that's been of interest, and I will catch you next time. Hopefully I'll have something else to do for you. I'm starting to get into the mood to be back out here. I just need to find something to do. So, thanks very much for watching. Please do take care, and I will catch up with you soon.